Okay, so now yesterday we have completed something that is known as a strings in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Different types of methods that we have gone through, where we have seen like number of methods to get utilized, what kind of questions that can appear from the strings part, and so on. Right. Now, in our today's session, we'll talk about another type of concept that is known as objects in JavaScript and TypeScript. Objects in TypeScript. Okay. Now, what is generally object is? So, if we know, if you basically know, or if you have worked on, if you have basically worked on any other tools and technology in the past, you might be knowing that object is something where you, uh, which is basically helping us to get the properties and methods from any of the class, right? That means object is something in a general language or in a German generic terminology. It is something which is visible to us, like any object. Laptop is also object. Books are also object. Pens, bottle, and so on. Everything are objects basically, right? Why does it an object? Because it will have the properties, it will have the method, and so on. So inside, what happen in terms of a technical terminology is object is something by utilizing by basically utilizing the object, we'll also be able to access the properties and method that will be creating inside a class or inside a function. Okay, so but in JavaScript and TypeScript, object is generally a collection of key and value pair. Collection of key and value pair. Okay. Whenever you, let's say, if you are going through with any codes or anything that it has already written inside your organization, and you see something known as something which is available inside a inside a curly braces. Okay, having a key value pair, that is known as an object. Collection of key value pair inside the curly braces. Inside the curly braces. Example. Example. Something which is this key colon value. Okay, and it can be something. It can be anything. Let's say name. Sorry, name colon. Let's say some name is as Raj over here. So this becomes an object in JavaScript and TypeScript. Something that you see available inside a curly braces having a key value and value pair which have been separated using a colon is known as an object in JavaScript and TypeScript. In a formal definition, it is basically a collection of key and value pair inside the curly braces is known as an object in JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, and generally we know that when if you have worked with Java, you know that something which we create like this, which is class name, then object reference equals to by using a new operator and then class name that you provide it over here becomes the object. And this obj that you see that we have written as a variable name becomes the object reference. That means this is a process of creation of an object. You create a class, and to access a methods and property inside the class, we create an object. That is one way, again, that are available inside our inside um, both JavaScript and TypeScript when we go for a class creation. But apart from that, there are different ways in which we can create an object. It is not restricted to when you create a class and to access the properties and method inside the class, you have to create an object. No, it is not only the way in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, let's see. There are different ways in which we can create an object. We can declare an object. And then also we'll be able to access, like we'll be able to declare the different ways of our object over here. Okay, I hope everyone are on the same page and able to hear me properly along with the pages, screen
Yes,
size.
Praveen.
Right. Okay, so now just help the other people whoever is trying to join and they're saying that they are not able to. Just help them saying that just copy paste the URL inside the browser and they'll be okay. So there are different ways in which we can create an object in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, there are a slight difference that we have in terms of TypeScript when we go for, because TypeScript also allows us to create a certain data types value, right? But let's see, how do we declare a variable? How do we declare, how do we basically declare an object in terms of both JavaScript and TypeScript over here? Okay, so there are n number of ways in which we can create an object in JavaScript and TypeScript. The first one that we have over here is, known as literal object. What is literal way of declaration? Literal object. What is literal way of declaration? Literal way of declaration is something. Literal means anyone have any idea what is literal?
When you write something in the codes.
Square bracket. We have to
without
write.
giving data type.
Okay. So literal means whenever you define a value to a variable directly, either by using a square bracket for array or by using a quote for string or by using a numeric data type and so on. Okay. That means whenever you try to define a value directly inside a variable, so let's say let I equals to JS. This is known as a string literal. When you define it as I equals to 10. Numerical literal, like literal, like defining the variable of a value of a variable in a literal way. That means you are directly assigning the value to a variable. Okay, and that is known as a literal way of declaration of anything, either variable or anything over here. Even in terms of when we try to declare an object will also be a variable itself. Object will also be a variable itself. And whatever or whenever we try to define it directly inside the curly braces having a key and value pair is known as literal object. Literal way of declaration of an object. Okay, literal way of declaration of an object. Fine. Now, there are different ways. The first one that we have is known as a literal object. Second one that we have is inline type object. Inline type object. By using inline type object as well, we'll be able to declare the object. Third that we have is using type alias. Using type alias. What is alias? Alias means some dummy name that you have given to something. Okay, this is also one of a way where you can declare the object. Now the fourth one that we have is by using an interface as well. By using interface keyword as well, you will be able to define the object using interface. Interface is not something similar to, if any one of you are here from the Java background, then interface is not similar to that you see inside a interface. This is entirely different. The concept is same, but declaration is entirely different over here. Okay. The fifth one that we have is a most common way of declaration of an object or creation of an object using class, using classes or using class. So we'll also see that how do we create a class, and to access the methods properties inside from the class, how do we create the object? It is similar to this, but the only difference that we have in terms of creation of an object for a class in JavaScript and TypeScript, instead of this name, instead of this class name, it becomes let or const. Okay. So that will be the creation of object for a class. This is using a class over here. Sixth that we have is using a constructor function. Using also a constructor function. So in terms of a function, we have said that there is something known as a function constructor, right? So inside a function constructor, there is something that we have defined by using a new keyword over here, right? And then another type of a function that we have is something known as a constructor function way of constructor function, right? This is a function constructor, which is a function as a keyword available inside the JavaScript and TypeScript, which is known as a constructor. The same way, we also have a constructor, which will generally be creating inside the class. We'll also see by creating a constructor over here as well. By using a constructor function as well, you will be able to create an object. What is in the constructor function? So whenever, as we discussed earlier at the time of discussing a function, is that whenever a keyword comes as a constructor, that means we have to create an object to access the properties and method available inside a constructor. So if you see over here, this function is a constructor, function constructor. This is a constructor available inside JavaScript and TypeScript. And to access this function, we have used a new keyword over here. And whenever or wherever you create, whenever or wherever you use a new keyword, that means you are trying to create an object over there. Okay, that means we have created an object over here to access the properties and methods that are available inside this function and initialize the variable that this function constructor is accepting as a parameter. Okay, so sixth way of using as a constructor function, and seventh way that we have is using as a factory functions. Factory function. I'm not sure whether we have mentioned it over here or not, which we have named arrow. No. So there is a type of function which I usually discuss at the time of going through with the object concept itself, because what happened in terms of a factory function is a function which will return an object, is known as a factory function. Function which will return an object directly is known as a factory function. Okay, any function that you are trying to write, if it is returning something, if it is returning you an object, that is known as a factory function. Okay, so by using a factory function way as well, you will be able to create a type of function over here, type of an object over here. Okay, and then there are a few concepts that we have, which is also known as, like we have also discussed this at the time of functions, which is using optional parameter, and there will be a new keyword which will be available inside the class, which will be known as a read only. Okay, using an optional parameter that we have already seen, I believe. Definitely I should have discussed this optional parameter and default parameter. In the same way, we also have an optional parameter inside the object, and there is something known as a read only property. Read only property means you cannot change the value of the property going forward. That becomes the read only property. Okay, so these are 7 different ways in which we can create an object in TypeScript. There are 7 different ways in which we can create an object in TypeScript. Now, if you see over here, every 7 different types are not applicable for JavaScript over here. Because when we talk about a type, you see a type something are available, those are not available inside a JavaScript, because we know that data type will not be defining in JavaScript. I know you all should be knowing this thing, right? That the syntax declaration between the JavaScript and TypeScript is the difference between the syntax declaration is we do not define a data type in JavaScript, whereas in TypeScript, we have a data type as an optional part. Right? Now, in the same way, we have some of the concept that we see as inline type, using type alias, using interface are available in only TypeScript, not in JavaScript, because it requires a data type declaration as well. Okay, so literal object are available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Inline type object are available only in TypeScript. Using type aliases are available in only in TypeScript. Using interface are available only in TypeScript. Using class are available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Constructor function are available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. And then factory functions are also available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. But there are three things which is basically inline type object, using type aliases, and using interface way of creation of an object are not available in terms of JavaScript. Okay. Now the question comes like, do we really require all these 7 different types of creation of an object? So the answer is no. Basically, we have to understand literal object and using classes. How do we create an object using a literal object and then or a literal way of creation of an object and using a classes. Apart from that, all the 5 different things that you see are just for the interview purpose. We have to have a basic knowledge of this, that how do we declare an object using, let's say, type alias, or using interface, or using constructor function, or using factory function. Those will never be using in terms of the test automation, and never be using in terms of, again, the programming as well. Whenever we have to use, either we'll be using a literal object where we'll define the value directly inside the curly braces, or we'll create a class, and to access the methods and property, we'll be creating an object for the class. Apart from that, all the other types are just for the understanding purpose. Okay. So these are different ways in which we'll be creating an object in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Few of them are specifically for TypeScript itself. Okay, let's start it with a first one, which we have is known as a literal way of declaration of an object, which is literal object. Okay, how do we define it, or how do we declare the object by using a literal way? Is a simple. Let's see the syntax. How do we define it? Something that you define it inside the curly braces is known as an object in both JavaScript and TypeScript, where in terms of a literal, directly we are defining the value inside the curly braces is known as a literal object. Okay, syntax is you have to basically define a variable, which is, let's say, let obj, which is object over here. That means this will become your object. This is basically known as object reference. Okay, so this will become your object. And inside the curly braces, you can provide the key and value pair. That means key and value over here. It can have a multiple values over here. And in terms of TypeScript declaration, we can also provide the data type over here as well. Data type. Okay. And whenever you try to provide a data type should have to be in the curly braces over here. Okay. This will check for the inline type. That comes under the inline type. But this is a basic way of declaration of an object in both JavaScript and TypeScript. If you remove this, this becomes a JavaScript code. If you also keep the data type over here, which is known as an inline type object, becomes the TypeScript way of declaration of an object. Okay, so in general, let object name or object reference equals to directly inside the curly braces, you can define the value of the variable, key and value pair. It is not restricted to only define the key and value. inside this key and value, you can define anything. You can even define a function over here as well. You can even define a function inside inside the object as well. Okay, not only the properties definition, you can also define a function inside the object as well. Okay, now one concept that we have to understand, whenever you try to provide a key, key you can directly define without using any data type. You can simply name it as a name, let's say name, and value will be having some kind of data type. Again, this will be, let's say, name1, or let's say you can simply say it as a function. Whatever the key that you declare internally in both JavaScript and TypeScript, that key will be considered as a string data type. Internally, it will convert or it will store the key as a string format, key in the string format. Okay, let's try to concentrate on for the next 10 minutes. It is very important because if you understand this, the first one, that means understanding of all the one will follows for the will basically follows over here. If you understand this easily, we'll be able to understand all the different types over here. Okay, so let's concentrate on ask the questions. I'll stop after discussion of literal object for a few minutes to see if you have any kind of questions. Okay, so let's see an example for this, a simple example that I'll declare over here. How do we start it with? Either you can use a let or key. There is nothing that you only have to use a let keyword. You can also use let or const. Okay, so let's say I'll just define it as a const keyword, and then we'll say it as a person. Example, some kind of value object name that I have given. Okay, what the object name that I have given over here is a person as an object. Okay, and how do we define this? How do we define the object? Inside the curly braces. Okay, inside the curly braces. And what will be inside the curly braces? A key and value pair, right? So I'll simply say it as name. Let's say the value of this particular name is John. Some values that we have defined, some random values I have taken. So this key that you see, you cannot define it in this way. You cannot define it in this way. So it will automatically be stored inside the JavaScript and TypeScript in this particular way. However, you see not value.
Your voice is not clear, Praveen. We can't hear you properly.
Sorry, Praveen, but still your voice is breaking.
Praveen, completely, it's quiet from your end. Nothing we can hear.
Okay, so I hope you should be able to hear me now.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Yeah.
Could you please repeat this one? Because we completely lost your voice.
Right, right. Okay. Like,
Again, the same issue, Praveen. Like,
Yeah, again it is.
yeah. No, Praveen. It's still
No, Praveen.
breaking.
After 9:30 sometimes.
Yes. It. Your voice is still breaking.
Okay. Let's see what-
Still not able to hear.
Right, right. I'm just trying to figure it out. Just give me a minute. Can you hear me now?
No, still breaking.
Still breaking, Praveen.
Okay. So let me do one thing. Um, is it clear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
fine
sir.
now.
Better.
Okay. Okay. So stop me again when you feel that it is breaking. I'll try to rewind it. Okay. So stop me if you feel that something is breaking again. Okay. Um, so we were trying to discuss regarding the object declaration of an object, right? So in general, declaration of an object means we in terms of a literal way of declaration of an object means we can define an object and inside the curly braces directly we can define the value which is in the
Praveen,
function.
your screen is not visible.
Praveen, your screen is
Screen
not
is
visible.
Screen is not visible.
I think you're not sharing your screen.
Okay, let me know if you're once you start seeing the screen.
I think you have said, but it is completely
Yeah.
blank for me.
Correct, correct. You have said, but it's black, complete black. Black.
Okay, let's do one thing. I'll stay it over here. I'll just rejoin.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
Audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. And um,
Able to
Yeah, I
see
can
that?
see your screen now.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Fine. Okay. Let's see if it is again breaking. I'll find out the solution for this. What is happening? Okay. So here, what I was trying to discuss is whenever you create an object using a literal way, that means you can simply define the value inside the curly braces using a key value pair. Right? Inside the curly braces, you can simply use a key value pair, which key will always be in the form of however you are writing. Let's say name, age, function, any other things that you can define, but internally it will get stored as a string format. So internally, this name key that you see will get stored as like this, which is name. If you again define something, let's say age over here, which is age colon 30, then this will again stored inside the JavaScript and TypeScript like this. Okay, we do not have to mention it specifically that this is in the form of string format or in the form of other things. Okay, it will internally get stored in the form of string way. You just have to define the key and value. Value, whatever the value that we see over here can be of any data type. It can be of string, it can be of number, it can be of a Boolean data type as well, or any other data type as well. But the key you have to just define as a text value, and that will automatically get stored as a string format. Okay. On the same page, everyone?
Not get you exactly, Praveen.
So not able to hear me properly or not getting the concept?
Not getting the concept exactly.
Okay, so what happened over here is we basically have to declare the object inside a curly braces using a key and value pair. Okay, and key you can define anything, whatever you think that the name of the key that you can define it over here. Value can be of any data type. It can be string, it can be numeric as well. But internally, that means in terms of a processing internally inside the JavaScript and TypeScript, this key will get converted. Only the key, not the values. The key will get converted into a form of string. Okay, so it will inside the JavaScript and TypeScript, how it will get stored as something like this, which is name as values and age as value. Okay, this person object that we are trying to create will get internally inside the JavaScript and TypeScript get stored as a this form, which is name as a which is like key as also a string format and value whatever the data type that you have provided. Age will get again inside the single quote or double quote and then whatever the value that you have provided over here. Okay, so that means all the keys that you define inside the object will always be considered as a string data type. That means in the form of string that it get internally stored inside the JavaScript and TypeScript. I'll show you the proof for that as well, that basically all the keys will get stored inside the JavaScript and TypeScript in the form of string. Value, you can define any other values as well. So let's say is employed, which is one of a key that we have defined. And for that, we can see like true or false. That means whether this person is employed or not. Okay.
Praveen, so here I have one question. Sorry to interrupt in between.
Yes.
So here we have age. As you said that the key will be stored in that string form. So here is that age. If you are mouse over the cursor here, so it's showing in number. So it should
Right.
also be in a string, right?
No, this is showing as a number that you have defined the data to. This data type that you see that it is defining is for the data that you have stored inside is. This value that you
Okay,
see
but
over here,
that key value.
name as a string, which is like name that you have defined as a value in the form of string. Age you have defined as a key, which is having a value as number. Is employed that you have defined over here, which is a key, is having a value as Boolean type. Okay, so whatever the
Got
data
it.
type
It's
that
like
you
a
see
key
is
will be
for the
storing that.
right. Internally, this key will get stored as a string format. I'll show you the proof as well. Just give me like few minutes of time and we'll show you the difference. What I basically mean to talk over here. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
And inside this, you will also be able to define the function. So let's say I'll just say it as person info colon, and then you can define a function over here. Okay. Function in the form of anonymous function where we do not have to write the name, and inside this you can write some kind of value. Let's say I just want to print all the values which is available inside, which we have given over here. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we access the properties that we have defined over here?
Backtick dollar curly braces.
Right, that is one way you can basically define. But generally, how do we get the value is you can simply say it as, let's say, a backtick way. Let's say name is dollar, and then inside the curly braces you have to provide the value. Okay, and then again you'll be writing a comma, and then say that, let's say, is something which is in the form of dollar, and then is over here, right? And then again you'll be also saying it as something which is, let's say, is employed, some kind of value, some kind of random things, and then you can say it as a dollar and is employed over here. Is employed, that we see. Okay, so what we have given over here is we have simply given this is the same thing. We have simply given the values over here, whatever the value that we are calling inside this one. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to print the name that we have given inside this curly braces, is that we have given or defined, and is employed that we have defined over here. Right? But if you see, it is saying that cannot find name is employed. Again, if you see over here for this, it says something that is available over here, and it says something over here, right? It generally says this one that it is not defined. Okay. Basically, it also has to throw the similar things, but let's see what is happening over here. Let it be for now. I'll explain you a concept in next few minutes, and there you'll understand how do we have to access the properties and variable that you have defined inside an object. Okay. So this is basically an object, which is person is an object which stores a value inside the curly braces, which have a 3 different properties and one particular function. Whenever you have to access the properties, how do we access it? By if we have a class, whenever you create an object for a class, how do you access the properties and method? By using object.property or object.method, right? So there are 2 different ways in which we can access the values from the object. One, which is a simple way with which we say it as object reference dot property. That means a key. Okay. And second way of declaration is how do we get the value inside an array? How do we generally get the value from an array? So we know that array will also internally get stored in the form of key and value pair. Right? I hope you people remember this. Yes?
Yes, bro.
Okay. So array will also get stored inside the key in the form of key and value pair. And how do we get the value? Array of index over here. What is index? Index is a key for array. In the same way, you can also access by using the object as well, which is object reference. Inside the square bracket, you can provide the key, which is name or whatever the value that you have defined over here. But that key that you have to access by using a string format. Why? Because we know that inside an object, the key will get stored in terms of a string format. And this will be the proof that all the keys that you have defined over here will get stored as a string format. Let's see in a minute. Now, let's say, let's access the properties and method by using first way, by using object dot key. What is the object that we have created over here? The object name is a person, right? To access the values, let's say it as a person, which is an object, and then dot the name that you are trying to access. So we have a name property over here. Okay. And then we again have another property as well, which is, let's say, person dot age. And when you have to call the function, you can also call the function by using directly person dot, what is the function name? We have an info, but this is not a variable. This is also a property, but this is in the form of function. How do we call a function? By using a parenthesis over here. Okay. And if you try to execute this, let's see what is happening. So how do we execute it? By using tsx objects.ts, and this returns us a value which is John for the name, 30 for the age, and name is not defined for the person info that we have defined over here. Okay, it is throwing an error at name over here, saying that name is not defined, or is employed is not defined, or age is not defined. Okay, but if you see, you can access the properties and method in the same way by using object.key, again key, and object.key for the function. If the key is storing a function, then you have to provide a square bracket over here. Okay, let's comment it out for now for a few minutes, and I'll come back to this again. Now let's see, how do we access in terms of the another way that we have? How do we access the value in the another, like in terms of another types? So how do we access it? We'll just say it as simply a person, start a square bracket and give the reference of a key. So if you just say it as a name, it will throw us an error saying that name is not defined. This name was basically a key available earlier in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript. Let's change it to name1 over here. Name1 over here, and then name1 over here. Now, if you see in this case, what it's generally saying it as person of a name1. That means this is an object which is also having a, we are trying to access the value which is name1 from this particular person. Okay, we have not given inside the string over here for now. Okay, let's try to execute this and see what is happening. So this will again throw us an error saying that name1 that you are trying to define at this place is not defined. Name1 is not defined because how do we get the value? We have to get the value in terms of a string format over here, because keys for the JavaScript and TypeScript object, whenever you try to create, that will get stored in the form of string format, over here. And whenever you are trying to refer the key over here, that becomes the string variable, string way of basically accessibility of the object values. Now, if you try to again run this time it will give us a value which is John over here. That means this is basically a proof that whatever the key that we define inside the object, that will get stored as a in the form of string. Now you can also get the value which is age. Age, the number that it is defining is for the value that you have stored inside the object. Okay. In this case also, it will refer to a key which is available as a age over here, and this gives us a value which is 30. Okay, now how will you call? You might be having a question. Okay, these were properties, so we have called in this way. But how do we call this function? Because this is a function, right? This is basically a function. You cannot write in this way, right? Because this is a function, so you have to refer it in a function way. It says that this person info that you are trying to access basically have a function available inside this. So after the square bracket, you have to mention it as a parenthesis over here. After the bracket, you have to mention it as a parenthesis because this denotes a function over here inside the object. Okay, and when you try to get this, this will again throw you an error saying that name is not defined or name1 is not defined over here. Okay, now let's say the concept over here. This was just a proof that it basically store the key in the form of string always. Now anyone knows that why are we trying to, why this name1 is or is employed is throwing error over here? Can anyone guess over here what is happening?
We're directly calling it without doing %.name1.
Okay. Any other things? May I know your name, please?
Pratik.
Prashant. Okay, Pratik. Okay. Any other person over here who can just try to explain? Okay.
I think we need to restore in that variable, doing that function expression that we do, and then we'll take that reference and we'll calling that one. That might be work. I'm not so sure. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. No worries. No worries. So what happened is this says that you have declared a key and a value which is available inside an object. Which is available inside an object. This is an object, and there you have defined a key and value pair. Okay, so whenever you have to access this key and values pair, you cannot access it directly. You cannot access it directly because it is not accessible directly. Will you be able to access this name1 over here, console.log name1? No, right? Why not? Because it is available inside an object. Because it is available inside a curly braces, and inside the curly braces, everything will be in the form of local variable, right? And it is also available inside the curly braces. When it is available inside the curly braces in the form of key and value pair, that means that is an object. And to get the values, get the properties and method from the object, we have to call it with the object dot key or object dot property or object dot function that you have defined. Okay, so when you try to access these properties outside of basically this object, you basically have to refer it with a person dot name1. Okay, in the same way over here as well, you have to call this person dot name1. Okay, because you are saying that this name1, which is available inside an object, we cannot access it outside directly by providing the name. For that, we basically have to access it with a reference of the object over here. Okay, in this case, we know that the object that we have created is a person over here. In this case, we know that the object that we have created over here is a person. But what if you are trying to create a constructor function? Or what if you are trying to create a class? Inside the class, you will not be aware of what kind of object name that you will be providing, right? Inside the class, let's say, what is class basically? So let's say I'll give you something. So this is a class where I'm trying to create some values, which is test over here. And inside this, I'm trying to write some kind of property. So let's say name something and age something. And then I'm trying to create a constructor over here. Do not worry, we'll explain you this concept in our next session. When where we'll be try to see like how do we store a value. how do we store, how do we create an class, and how do we create an object? Okay, so here we know that whenever we create a class, object of a class, we'll be creating an object after the completion of this particular class itself, right? So there I'll be providing some kind of value and some kind of things over here at the time of creation of an object. So if you see this object that we have created outside of the class, right? This is a class which have been ended over here, and outside of the class we'll be able to create the object. Inside the class, you do not require to create an object, and that is a waste of time, right? So when you try to access the variable properties and method that are available inside the class, you will be basically creating an object outside of the class. And at this point of time, if you try to refer it with an object, what kind of name you will be providing over here? This test. This test is not defined. Where is this test coming from? Where is this test basically coming from? Let's say you do not create anything, and then it started throwing error, cannot find name test. Okay. So we generally will not be aware of what kind of object name that will be provided. Okay. And there comes the concept of a keyword known as this keyword. Okay. This keyword basically refers to an object of a class, refers to an object, a current object. It can be refers to an object. It can be whenever you are trying to access something inside the object, that particular object. When you are trying to create an object for the classes that we have just seen, this keyword will refer the object for the class. Okay, here we know that we have an object that we have created is a person. So you can simply use over here saying that person.age and then person.is employee. This is allowed over here because you have already created a person object, name of the object as a person. But what if when you create a dynamic object? What if when you create multiple objects? Or what if when you create a class and then you utilize that class inside other classes? So when you utilize that class in the other classes, you will be creating an object in the other class, not in the same class, right? And you can provide any kind of name for the other class object, the object that will be creating inside other class, right? So generally, beforehand itself, we might not be aware of what can be the object name. And that is where we use a keyword known as this keyword. And this keyword will generally refers to the object that we'll be creating for this particular object. So in this case, we already know what is the object. So whenever you provide this keyword over here, any question? Okay. So this keyword refers to an object that you have created over here. When you use this keyword inside the class, inside the constructor that we have seen, that this keyword will refer to the object when you create for a class. Wherever you create an object, either this inside the same class or outside of the or in the other classes, whatever the object that you'll be creating for that particular class will get initialized over here as well. So this keyword that you see refers to the object that you have created. So for the current object, this keyword will become person. So instead of this dot name at the time of calling this particular function over here, let's say if you call this function or if you call this function. So at the time of calling this function, this will refer to the object that you have used over here, which is person.name. And this person will go and sit in the place of this over here. Okay. Now, if you try to execute this, you will say that this will return us a value. Earlier, it was throwing name1 is undefined. Now, this time you will see that it returns us a value, which is Name is John, age is 30, and is implies as true over here. Okay, and how it is displaying? Is displaying because we have now referred it with this keyword. This keyword, THIS, is a keyword which will always refer to an object of a class or object, whatever the object that you are trying to define over here. Okay. Is it?
Praveen,
Yes. Yes.
I'm not getting this concept actually. If you
Mhm.
can explain one more time.
Right. So what happens generally is we have declared an object which is const person equals to some value, which is available inside a curly braces as a form of key and value pair. This is key, this is value. This is again key, this is value. This is again key, this is value, and this is key for the function. And then value we are trying to, inside the function, we are trying to access some kind of value, right? So whenever you try to access the properties that you have defined inside the object, how do we basically get, how do we basically access the properties? By using object dot key, right? How do we access the value? By simply using an object dot key. Anything, any key that you can access by using the object reference that you have given over here. This is your object, and this is your object by using the object that you are trying to access by object dot any of the key that you have defined inside the object. Okay. Till here you understood, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now what we are trying to do is we are also trying to access the key, the basically property. This key is known as a properties, or these are basically a properties, which is a combination of key and value pair. So this property that you see that we have defined inside the object, it says that I will not be able, like you will not be able to access it automatically, either inside a function or outside of this particular object. Either inside a function or whenever you define a function inside the object, it says that I am not directly accessible. So however you access me outside of the object, in the same way you have to access it. Okay. And how do we access? By using object reference dot key over here, right? So you have to provide the object reference over here. How do we access the value? By using a person dot name one. That means here you can also say it as a person dot name one. Okay. Till here you understood concept, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So to access the value, we have used an object dot key. So in the same way, we also have to provide object dot key over here. Object dot key, which is what is object? A person that we have defined.
Person.
And inside this object, we have different keys. Okay. In terms of instead of a person, we have a concept or we have a keyword known as this keyword. THIS, this keyword. This keyword refers to the object that you are referring over here. This keyword basically refers to the object that you are referring over here at the time of calling the function.
Okay.
Okay. So how are you trying to call this particular function? By using a person as an object, right? You cannot again access this particular function by simply saying it as person info, because this as a property or this as a key are available inside the object. And to get any of the keys or any of the properties from the object, we have to use object dot key, right? So whatever the object that you have used over here to access the function, this object will go and sit in the place of this keyword.
Okay.
Okay, so ultimately this keyword will refer the object that you are trying to use.
Okay.
Okay, so that is where this keyword comes into picture, which basically refers the object that you are trying to create or object that you are trying to use. Okay.
So just one question over here, like
yes,
while trying to print that person dot name one, so over there, can we use this keyword? I mean,
No.
this dot name one.
Right. I was
Okay.
coming to that point. You cannot use this keyword over here because this keyword will only be accessible inside your either object or inside the classes. Okay.
Okay.
Why? Why? Because whenever you call these properties or these functions that are available inside an object, you will be basically using an object, right? Object reference. And that object reference will be identified by this keyword only inside the classes or inside the function, inside the object that you have declared by using a curly braces. Okay.
Okay.
Outside of the function, when you try to use this over here, this will get confused that what kind of this is this you are trying to declare over here. Here it will get a confusing that what kind of this is available over here. Are you trying to refer something? What kind of things that are you trying to refer? Here this will question. Now in this case, this will not question because this says that okay, I am getting called by using an object, and that object is similar to the this keyword over here. But in this case, this will not get identified over here as any object. So whenever you are you have to access the properties and method, you have to refer it with the object that you have created.
Okay.
Praveen, above is we are using this dot name one, right? So over there, can we use like person dot name one? Yeah,
You
over
can
there.
use a person dot name because you know the object is a person.
Yeah.
Right? But if you do not know what will be the object, at that point of time, you always have to use this keyword only.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? As I was trying to show you just a couple of minutes ago regarding the class, right? So you have a class and inside that you have some kind of method over here. So let's say name equals to a name something and is something, and that you have created a constructor over there. Inside you have some values and that you are trying to store. But inside the constructor, it is similar things. When you try to access this outside of like inside any of the method or inside any of the function inside the class, you basically have to store by using this dot name equals to name and this dot is equals to is. What is this refers to? So this will refer to the object when you create an object for this particular class. Okay, so what happened in general is you will create a class which is let's say test equals to new test over here, and this accepts some kind of value which is let's say Rahul, then have an 80 years. And if you try to access the name over here, you'll have to just make it as test.name. Right? So as soon as you give a test.name over here, whatever the value that you have defined as a this will get replaced with a test over here. This will get replaced with a test over here. But you cannot write a test over here because the object you might be defining with a test one or something else name. So we do not know here that what kind of object that you'll be creating a later part of the time whenever you try to access the properties and method available inside a class, right? And that is where this keyword help us in identifying any kind of object that you will be creating over the period of time. Okay, whatever the object
It is used, one question. It is used to access local variables, Praveen, like inside the class.
Yes, yes.
So in the constructor, instead of name and age, if we keep A and B, so we can use name is equal to A and age is equal to B, right?
Exactly. I'll explain you that things in the next session. So you can simply use name equals to A over here and is equals to B. And these
we need not to use this, right? Without using this also it will work.
You mean name equals to like this? You're talking about like this?
Yeah.
You can refer it over here and name one and name one. You're talking about this one, right?
Yeah, correct.
Right. So let's see what is happening over here in this case. So when you try to print, which is test1.name1, as you have given a value which you are trying to refer a name one over here, it will basically get that what is the name one that you have defined, where is the name one it is coming from. So this will also not be able to identify over here that where is this name one that you have defined is coming from. Okay, when you make it as a this dot name, this will get referred for this particular variable that you have defined. Okay, and that is where we basically have to use a this. This keyword refers to the current object that you are trying to create or that you are trying to use. Whatever the object that you use for calling those functions or constructor or any of the properties, that will get replaced over here in the place of this keyword. So generally this refers to the object that we create for any of the class or any of the object declaration that you have done. Okay, is it clear now?
Yeah, Praveen, can you just
Yeah.
explain once the person info colon function?
This one?
Yeah, that line. Yeah.
This is and this is basically an anonymous function. There is a
Okay, so we
function
are
that,
just defining that function over there, right?
right, yes.
Okay.
Okay, is this clear for everyone over here?
So Praveen, like
Yes.
whenever you will be executing this code, the flow will be like from the console.log, it will identify what was my object, right? So it will found that the person is my object, and inside that, so when you are declaring the function, I mean inside the function with this keyword, so that way the code will able to identify that I need to execute this method or the function, right? With of the
Right.
person object.
Right. So I was coming to the next point, which is like, how does the execution work? So that is however you have explained over here. So whenever you use any kind of object over here, let's say any kind of, right? So at this point of time, it will come to a console.log and it will try to find, okay, this is an object. Do we have any object over here? Then it will try to find out, do we have any object? Yes, this is an object. So it will go inside this and all the values that you have given over here will get initialized wherever you have used this keyword. So person dot name, it will refer, do we have a name as a keyword? Person dot age, do we have a age as a key over here? And then you have given also a person info, which is using an object, which is person dot person info, right? So what it says is, this is an object and inside this is available as a function. So it will go inside this function and try to find out what is the value that we have written inside this particular function. It will go inside this console.log and then it will also find out, okay, do we have something known as a this dot name? So this basically refers to an object that you are trying to create. So in place of this, at this point of time, when you try to call the function, in place of this keyword, this will come and set it as like this, which is person. So here as well, when you try to execute here in terms of a class, this keyword will become test1 dot name1 at the time of execution. What is test1? The object that you have created. Okay, whenever you try to create an object and whenever you try to call some functions, whatever the object that you have written over here, and if you have also given a this keyword, that this keyword will change to the object that you have used at the time of execution.
Can we do, I mean, can we use the combinations like, for an example, in the function, for an example, in the function name is, we can use person, I mean the object and the property, right? And
Yes.
for the age, we can use these keywords. So still this code will be work.
Yes, it still will work because we already know that this person is an object over here.
Okay.
Okay. If you do not know at that point, as we do not know over here, that what could be the name of the function, sorry, name of the object. This will come to know at the time of creation of an object itself. So we cannot directly use test or person or any other things. We have to use in this case this keyword if we do not know what kind of object we'll be creating later on.
Okay, got it.
Right. So that's where this keyword comes into picture, which basically refers to an object. Either it can be a class object or it can be an object that we have defined over here. Okay.
I mean, this will be more useful when, you have created the class, but you will not know later on
Correct.
with which
Correct.
name you can initialize the class, right?
Right.
I mean, you
Right.
can initialize the object.
Exactly. Exactly. This will be much more useful at that point of time when you do not know what kind of object that you are trying to create. Here we know that we have a person as an object, so you can simply make it as person.name as well. But when you will be creating a framework in terms of a playwright, page object model framework will be creating a page and test class will be entirely different class. So inside the test class, to access the properties and method, you'll be creating an object inside the test class. So in terms of a page class, you will not be knowing what kind of name that will be providing for the object. So there we can use this keyword.
Okay.
Okay. So right, within the constructor as well. Right. So that's basically about the literal object, and other things follows the same. I'll just cut it over here. I'll comment it over here for now. Others will follow the same, which again will continue in our next session. Okay, but this is the main things that we have. Apart from that, every other concept, every other type of object that you'll see will have the similar function, similar things. Slight difference, but other things will follow the same. Similar concept if you understood this particular object creation and uses of the object over here. Okay. We have 7 different ways of creation of an object, but ultimately all the different types of object that we'll be creating will get converted in terms of the literal object itself. Even when we have used over here, right? We have used an object which is test1, right? If you just try to print this test1, what is the test1 that we have defined? You will see exactly similar way. However, we have stored inside the literal way of using a constructor. So you see, this is a test, which is an object name having inside the curly braces, which is name1 as Rahul and age as 80. This is exactly similar way we have defined the object over here. If you see this one, this and this becomes the same. Name1 something, comma is something over here. So ultimately, all the type of object will get converted at the end in the same format, however, we have defined over here. Okay. Other part of the things we'll see in the next session, where we'll also discuss the classes in the next session itself. Okay, that's it. You can
Praveen,
also, yes.
Can you push this code to that GitHub?
Yes, I'm just trying. Right now I'm trying to do over here. Let me check it out. Okay, I'll just add it. Okay, and then again we'll continue in the next session from wherever we have left it today. Okay, so I've pushed all the code. You should be able to see that in some time, in few seconds. And from here on, we'll continue in the next session, wherever we have left it. Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone. And